but we're in.
Why is that?
So we'll have to talk about the weather later.
What's that? Oh, there's no copy.
So let's see. The midterm will be up right after class on the website. Otherwise, I have it physically here, and I'll just get through the things you need to know, assuming they haven't been covered yet, and many of them have not. So this deals with the practice and practitioners, and assuming you read Rasmussen, I like to go, what I'll be covering is not necessarily covered from her particular framework, but still relevant. When I talk about, have I defined the word praxis for you? Nope. Praxis, not the Klingon moon, for you trekkers. Praxis is the intersection between theory and practice. And they change each other. You want them to change each other. So for example, when I say the field changes every 6 months, the basic biology of the human body doesn't necessarily change, but our understanding of it does. And there are certain things like drug trends that shift all the time according to economics and things like that are independent of what we often deal with within the field, because how do you keep track of things like that? So yeah, praxis, so where the theory lags behind practice, you basically want to have them meeting in a place so that you're at least doing things that are up to date, but as the field changes, you could still remain relevant, whatever relevant means. So the praxis of practitioners goes somewhat like this. You know, I always ask people when they say they want to get into this field, you sure you want to do this? So while, for example, an estimated 90% of practitioners in the addiction field are recovering, many are not. So the basic bottom line, you have to resolve your issues with addictions without necessarily getting triggered by the people you're seeing, or, for lack of a better word, freaked out by the people you're seeing, because essentially we're hearing horrific stories. If you came from a horrific story, you can't necessarily project your horrific story on somebody else that didn't have as heavy a time, or make light of somebody suffering. You basically want to be able to assist them without getting too heavily engaged. So you have to resolve your issues with addictions, including, it's okay to have opinions, but not necessarily have your opinion drive someone in a way that could use help. Okay? So not to be addicted to the things, or in at least the ways that your clients are. So yeah, I'm a coffee addict, but I don't have to knock over a 7-Eleven or rob a Starbucks. But I also, kind of set boundaries, maybe 2 a day. Regular coffee, 12 ounce. It's bad when I have to do double espressos to begin the day and end the day. I haven't been at that place for a long time. So hydrating, exercising helps more. So continually working to improve yourself and to be free, as it were. So you have to be imaginative enough and knowledgeable enough to guide them through what they're going through, but not necessarily have to have gone through it yourself. In fact, one of the things that, in terms of research psychology, they find out is that most people don't necessarily have to have had the same experience to be able to talk people out of that experience. That's there's a technical term that I'm blanking on now. but I'll come back to it because it was in a TED Talk. In fact, if you look up TEDxUOregon.com, there is a research psychologist that actually did a talk about people and their expectations and stereotypes and how you can help people, So, you have to be imaginative enough and knowledgeable enough about what they're going through to guide them through what they're going through, and involved enough to be compassionate and detached enough to be effective. Courageous enough to go where they need to go, and also to be able, if you produce an emotional reaction in them, to basically stay compassionate enough so that, okay, I'm feeling you, but I'm not going to be outraged by what you're telling me. In the beginning of my career, I was dealing with a lot of people that were sexually abused, and I found that I was enraged, not at them, but at the situations, particularly when people are getting away with it, people in authority. And so, wait, I can't engage with that, I need to help this person, right? But it is useful to, I'm getting enraged by this, which is not to say that I don't get enraged by it now, but I'm still more directive. All right? So, but you still need to ask the question. So, courageous enough to go where they need to go, and you can't teach what you don't know. You can't lead where you don't go. So, go there, particularly if they need to go there. And they may or may not tell you if they need to go there verbally, but you will, by talking about it, by raising it as an issue, you give them permission to talk about it more. Yes?
So if you were in a session and they were looking for something that triggered you because of your past, what would you do? Just excuse yourself from the session, or how would you handle that?
You often can't do that. In fact, part of the assumption of being professional is you recognize that that's happening. And, you know, what I do, because you asked me, is, okay, I lengthen my breathing so that I'm in a calm enough space to, okay, this is not what they're going through, this is what I went through. Oh, look at this, a reservoir of anger and rage. I got to make sure that I don't project that on them. So remain calm, and the breath allows you to do that. So whatever centering technique that, you know, because I also teach people a lot of centering techniques as well. It's part of that. So go there. Now, when talk about what Rasmussen didn't really, she basically gave an industry standard view in terms of the praxis of practitioners, and so when I talk about social constructs of addiction, the idea here is just like anything that we take to be true, that might change. The truth might change. The science changes. So as an example, I've from time to time, I watch media and I see these drug things on television, and from time to time people, produce television shows and, talking about various, epidemics, and my reaction is often, okay, we've been having this epidemic for 15 years. Why the attention to it now, and who are you concerned about? Because I'm more concerned, and I put this out, I'm more concerned with the people that aren't getting help regularly than the people that you may be concerned about, who have plenty of help. And yeah, they're doing pretty outrageous things, but they can be helped by it. I mean, they've got resources. I'm interested in the people that don't get resources. that have the same problem that your television show is not even addressing. So, social constructs of addiction. They're constructs or memes of addiction which then give rise to solutions and social policy. Or not. So, there's a word, enantiodromia, which literally means that which arises from its opposite. It's a Greek word. New word to spring on your friends. And this is the word, if it's in the dictionary, I usually preview dictionaries before I buy them. If this word is in the dictionary, I'll buy it. Not that I'm in the habit of buying dictionaries, but. So, in street talk, the idea of enantiodromia. Problems create solutions. Then, the solution to the problem creates new problems, which then need further solutions, and it basically becomes not only a self-fulfilling prophecy, but a loop.
Sounds like medication and symptoms.
Yeah. The cure to the disease is in the disease. Right? That which arises from its opposite. And the way in which you see the problem is the problem. Now, looking at an evolution of how this country in particular has looked at addictions as a problem, kind of informs what we do today. And so I'm just going to kind of take you through that. So this is part of the setup. So in enantiodromia, problems create solutions. Solution to the problem create new problems, which then find new solutions which create new problems. The cure to the disease is in the disease, and the way that you see the problem is the problem. So example with C. If somebody's abusing painkillers, the issue is how you're dealing with pain. Is it physical pain or emotional pain? If it's emotional pain, the drug is numbing your response to your own emotions. That's the problem. The addiction is then the symptom of the problem. The addiction has become the solution to the problem of you weren't taught how to deal with your emotions, so you're self-medicating yourself. Your emotions continue to not be resolved, but now you've got a new problem, is that you're physically strung out on a drug, which is going to have other consequences to you, right? So, cure to the disease is, okay, if your thing is pain, heal the pain properly. That means you have to be sober enough to actually be in to look at it. That's difficult. It's like, for example, dealing with a student who, a lot of our students are in this position where you're coming to college as the first person in your family that ever came to college, and you're a high school dropout, and that was more than a decade ago. Okay? So, for example, if you're training for a field which requires a foreign language, and you're having problems with the foreign language because if you don't know what a verb or a noun or an adjective is in English, learning what that is in Spanish ain't gonna help you. You have to go back and do the work that theoretically people got in not only 3rd and 4th grade, but in high school. Remember diagramming those sentences? Oh, well, that's why I dropped out. It's a quote. Yeah, okay. This is why you're having the problem. So a Spanish tutor ain't going to be able to help you with that because you can't diagram a sentence in Spanish, so you don't know because you don't have that skill in English, as an example. And so blowing up at the Spanish tutor is not going to endear you to people. The problem isn't necessarily in them. It's in your history, and especially if your emotions are tied up to what has happened to you, and you're medicating that, so these problems get tied in. All right, so 5 cultural ways of seeing addictions. And the reason I say cultural is because Rasmussen and others basically take the way that we look at the treatment field as not necessarily being a cultural view. For her, it's the normal view. And one of the things that we've been finding in treatment is that normal isn't normal for everybody in the same way. So, first, addiction as sin. Willful misbehavior. So, if your view is addiction as sin, and sin is willful misbehavior, and sin is a religious term, notice that, right? So the solution is to punish the addict. And this gives you a simple binary. Oh, you're willfully doing wrong, throw you behind in jail. Addiction as disease. Then the solution is treat the addict with 12-step based treatment using the disease model. And addiction as maladaptive behavior. And the solution is treat and teach the addict pro-social adaptive behaviors and skills, which in this particular approach means cognitive behavioral therapy, multi-systemic therapy, evidence-based practice, and all that. Now, this has been the treatment world up until relatively recently, say, for example, the last 20 years. The 12-step framework was invented in the late 30s, became the dominant mode of treatment after alcoholism was named as a disease in 1956. The solution became 12-step based treatment, 90 meetings in 90 days, etc. And then the scientists started getting into addiction as maladaptive behavior construct, and I think more or less that's where Rasmussen stops, though she acknowledges that culture is a dimension, and we've already kind of gone through. You know where my thoughts are on that, so we'll get to that in a bit. So cognitive behavioral therapy, multi-systemic therapy, individual, family, and social learning therapies. So for example, with the first one, addiction is sin, willful misbehavior. It's the basic policy from colonial times to 1956, punish the addict. Give them electroshock therapy, sterilize them, drop them into ice baths, lobotomies. Not making this up. That was treatment for alcoholism before 56. Huh?
And gambling.
And gambling, sure. Drug them, all kinds of things. Addiction is disease. Okay, so when the American Medical Association said alcoholism is a disease in 56, essentially is treating the addict with 12-step based treatment, basically with that framework includes higher power, having a sponsor, doing step work, the traditions, the idea of 90 meetings in 90 days, being the course of therapy. Now, one of the challenges with this view to the science folks is how many doses of higher power do you need, and where is the higher power? So if you look at the construct of what a disease is within the framework of medicine, diseases, like I showed you with the public health model, diseases are caused by something. Malaria is caused by bacteria. It's vectored by a mosquito. So there's a definite agent. What's the agent in alcoholism? The liquor store? And if this was like a disease, okay, like cancer is definitely a disease, right? So you have cancer cells and you remove the cancer and, okay, it's gone, or you treat it with chemo and it's gone. But then if the person has a relapse of cancer, do you blame the person for relapsing cancer? Okay, so do we blame people for having relapses on substances? Yes, we do. So this is a disease that is different than we treat differently in a policy way, and also in terms of our thought processes than other diseases. Okay, so the medical community goes, okay, we're into like science. So show me higher power. How many doses of higher power do you need to produce a lasting effect? Oh, you can't tell me that? I ain't buying it. Here's what I am going to buy. This is the science community speaking, right? All right? Maladaptive behavior. That's the language that they're talking about. Mal means bad, adaptive behavior. What you are doing is using a coping skill that's not the best one to use because it's ultimately damaging. That's from that framework, right? Science is the thing with this framework. What's God got to do with it? I'm sorry, that's quasi-religious. How much God do you need at a AA meeting to produce a lasting effect? See, the scientists ask questions like that, and when you can't answer them, with facts and figures and quantifiable data, right? Evidence-based practices, they're uncomfortable. All right, so solution, treat and teach the addict prosocial adaptive behaviors to replace the maladaptive behaviors that they developed, to get them to understand what they're going through. So part of this approach you've been getting from me, and that is talking about the neuroscience. Understanding, okay, these drugs are doing things to your brain, they're replacing emotions, you're basically feeling this particular way and then self-medicating. So the language of self-medication comes out of this framework. But they only go so far. All right, so it's basically looking at addiction is sin. This is basically where we're using incarceration as treatment, or incarceration in place of treatment. Within our framework, we're part of the medical community. So treating a medical condition with prison is not effective long term, especially since you can score dope in prison. Not that they admit that, but you can. Right? So, despite the near total belief of treatment agencies in this former disease model that's quasi-medical, the disease model is not supported by empirical data. Particularly, there are some major hypotheses that are disputed by the research crowd, the scientific crowd. For example, what I mentioned early on, THIQs. Okay, THIQ, not real, about being causative factor in addiction, not proven by the science. Okay, not a valid construct. So, the idea, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, or you are born an alcoholic, scientifically imprecise. Stanton Peele, in 1985, basically the maturing out concept, you grow out of addiction. Well, some people might. This is again within the disease concept. It's a spiritual disease or disease as metaphor. It's an object, so a metaphor is an object or idea used to symbolize something else, to make an analogy. So spiritual disease, primary disease, loss of control, powerlessness, small amount produces uncontrolled drinking. Maybe in some people, maybe not in others. Yes, people, we can observe this and people can report this with some regularity, but it doesn't necessarily happen with everybody, and so within the scientific view, you need to be able to explain the variances convincingly in a way that's replicable. So the strengths of the disease model is that it's simple. It proposes an alternative to the sin model, gives patients a psychological out. I'm powerless as long as I have this community of folks helping me to reinforce recovery. I work the steps, fearless in searching moral inventory, make amends, etc., etc. Okay? So, its strengths is that it's simple and proposes an alternative. And provides a global, non-using community. Let me see if I can shrink this so that it fits. Oh, compatibility mode means I can't change it. Oops. Wow, we've covered a lot of material. Feel overwhelmed sometimes.
I got a lot of shit on my plate, man.
Make compost.
Right? Working on it.
Got shit? Make compost.
Working on it. It's my area of opportunity.
There you go. Okay, so provides a global non-using culture. So, other weaknesses, does not examine the role of culture, learning, or environment, particularly where there's structured inequality. There are more liquor stores in your neighborhood. Drug dealers are not prosecuted in your neighborhood.
You have no idea.
Hmm?
You said you have no idea.
I bet I do.
We have a 2380 Roosevelt.
Ah,
This was bad. That's where I met him. He used to be next door. He was, this was horrible. There was like one right next to me, one on the other side of me, and one right up above me.
You know you're being recorded, right?
That's okay.
Okay, all right.
I hope they heard it. That's an anonymous report.
Hey, I don't want you targeted, so good thing. They can't see that. So, the effectiveness in general is generally poor as judged by high relapse rates. So if you had those same relapse rates with any other disease, you'd question the treatment. So, does not adequately explain compulsive substance use, and does not address current or historical trauma issues in various populations. I mean, I have been in the field long enough to observe the fight for women to get women's only treatment, particularly where women could have their kids go into treatment with them. That was a fight. Male practitioners couldn't see the need. Why do you want to do that? Heard of domestic violence? There's lots of reasons why you would do that. Just because Bill W. didn't want to do it, look, the field is evolving. So yeah, finally we've have women's treatment as a standard feature, but that wasn't always the case. So, maladaptive or evidence-based. Now, the thing with evidence-based in the scientific community, evidence-based means that some government or university has paid for the research to be done and then replicated it or had it replicated. Now, do they fund everything? So research is essentially consists of asking questions. If it never occurs to you to ask the question, will you do research on it? No. You think they ask questions about everything that addicts and alcoholics and people in recovery go through? No. So, maladaptive behavior, literally bad maladaptation or bad adaptation. Sure, it works, but something else would work better, like, in my opinion, consciousness. So, you didn't learn pro-social skills, so where do you learn pro-social skills? My commentary about not from Prozac, my whole thing about pills are not skills. You can't just medicate a problem. The drug won't make it go away. You actually need a skill set. And that was the original theory before the influence of Big Pharma, where we did teach people psychological skills and we only gave them pills for the immediate rough patch, assuming the rough patch lasted 3 weeks. You know, say you have one of the 5 major stressors, somebody dies or you get married or whatever. Let's take death. Don't want to equate marriage with death. But say you have a death, okay? You have the initial shock, you have the funeral, all that whole process. Maybe you need Prozac for that 3-week period and process your grief. You don't want to be necessarily medicated. You want to process your grief, right? So then you have counseling. This was assuming that you had a middle class, income and could afford therapy, right? Where therapy was available, right? So, but therapists are expensive because they have to pay for their training, etc. So pills became cheaper. Yes?
But doesn't it take 2 weeks for Prozac to get into your system and become effective?
Well, sure. Actually, less than a week, but yeah. You might be thinking of lithium. The lithium takes a while to build up to the right level. Prozac might be faster. So, for example, there are various theories, right? So, just to use one, Wormser's. 2 general conditions in developing compulsive substance use. The addictive search, that is, you're seeking external relief from overpowering internal drives. These are emotions. Something is missing, or it feels like something is missing. You don't know what it is, so you fill the empty space, if there is an empty space, with substances, because that's what everybody else is doing. And that's what you have name familiarity with. Oh, what's this spice stuff? Here, let me try it. Tastes like blueberries. Okay, why? But, yeah.
Huffing was big when I was in high school.
Caffeine?
Huffing? No.
Huffing, yes.
Yeah,
Huffing, yes. Right.
Aerosol. And I was just like, you're doing what?
Right.
Why?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Huffing Glade is like a 5-minute acid trip.
yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Why would you? Okay, right. So, 2 things. So, 1, the addictive search, and 2, the adventitious entrance of chemicals. Adventitious means that the chemicals are arriving. They're added from an outside and often unexpected source, rather than intrinsic, rather than being in the environment. So you're looking for something, you're looking for a solution or an answer, someone brings in chemicals, some chemical, and off you go. And developing, for example, adventitious also means developing in an unusual position. For example, a root growing downward from a branch. There are some trees that actually do that, but if you use this metaphor as basically, how does an addiction evolve in a person who didn't have addictions in their family, but did move into an addictive environment? Seems like it's added on unexpectedly from a different direction. So, within this framework, compulsive drug use is an attempt at self-treatment. That's where the language of self-medication comes from. So, narcotics and hypnotics, sedative hypnotics, like alcohol, benzodiazepines, counter rage, shame, jealousy, anxiety. Stimulants, depression and feelings of weakness. Psychedelics, boredom and disillusionment. Alcohol, guilt, loneliness, and related anxiety. So, for example, Kantian, Halliday, McAuliffe, alcohol, opiate, or cocaine addicts are victims of traumatic abuse and violence, using those substances to self-medicate that. The resulting rage, that is, a certain extreme intensity of anger at being abused,